America is the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our special, the Antifa religion. Antifa has been named a terrorist group. This is our Attorney General just the other day. The President has talked about this a lot as well. Today's show is going to be about what is Antifa? And then we'll talk to someone who has followed the money, and we'll talk to someone who has followed the violence. And then we'll wrap up with our politics by faith segment of this all. First, who are these people? Well, what do they do? Actually, let me start with what do they do. Here's one example. 4th of July, 2025, at an ICE detention facility in Alvarado, Texas, south of Dallas. 2 people in this group. Look at the group. Look at the, these are the mug shots of the people who were, all of them who were arrested. Look at these absolute just total losers. And we'll get to that point in a little bit. But 2 of them in particular were charged with terrorism offenses. Now, they all took part in this Antifa cell that planned an attack. And they had planned it purposefully on the 4th of July. They were masked up, dressed in black, as they do. And they arrived at a facility late at night, vandalized cars and cameras. Law enforcement responded. These terrorists shot back, shot a police officer in the neck. They also used fireworks and other explosives as distractions during their ambush. Police say they used reconnaissance on the center to find out how they could inflict the most damage. And a leader of this group trained the subordinates in firearms and close quarter combat, and they owned more than 50 weapons. The indictment calls Antifa a militant enterprise made up of networks of individuals and small groups, primarily ascribing to a revolutionary, anarchist, or autonomous Marxist ideology. So that's their technical definition. And they call for the overthrow of the United States government and law enforcement authorities in the system of law in general. So, first thing we need to debunk is this idea like, oh, well, Antifa means anti-fascist. So they're good. If fascist, this is seriously, like most people stop here. This is seriously most people in this country. They're like, fascism bad, anti-fascist good. And they're like, oh, it's in the name. What do you mean they're bad? How can you be okay with that level of thinking and that's it? You can call yourself anything. Look at what they do. Right? Like Planned Parenthood could call themselves, we love babies. But what do they actually do? When these activists call you a fascist for no reason, other than it just sounds harsh. That's why they like that word. You're not a fascist, of course, but it's like an F word. Right? You're a fascist. No backing at all, no truth, of course, but it doesn't matter. It just sounds bad, right? So if you're a fascist and they're anti-fascist, they're anti-you. But people are like, oh yeah, that's therefore good. So where does this come from? Actually, it goes back to the 30s. Antifa was started in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. So the Nazis took over Germany. Now, this is an interesting history thing that made me stumble for a minute. When we think Nazis and communists, I think most Americans, myself included, we just put them in the same category as bad. We're just like, bad. But then we kind of think of them as the same because they're in the same box. They hated each other, right? The communists of the Soviet Union fought against the Nazis. They hated each other. There were battles in Germany between the Nazis and the communists. They hate each other. And that's interesting. Like, why? Well, they got a couple of differences, right? So the communists are all about equality, right? Theoretically, about equality. And the Nazis were about hierarchy. And the communists were an international movement. They were like, workers of the world unite. And the Nazis were about nationalism. So pretty like fundamental differences. The communists thought that a class struggle was the most important thing. And the Nazis were focused on a race struggle, right? So different, both wrong, of course, but different. But in Germany, the Nazis won. So the communists got together, and by the way, so the communists called them fascists. The communists called the Nazis fascists. So the communists became anti-fascist, or Antifa. So this is important for a couple of reasons. First, when you think anti-fascist, or the Antifa, just think communist. That's what they are. They're communists. They've always been communists. From the beginning, they were literally the communists. The communist people hated the Nazis. They're fascists, we're anti-fascists, we're communists. It's just a synonym for communists. That's it is. You can even see it in their, and they know this too, like you can see it in their Antifa logo. It's the same logo from 1930s Germany. It's a black and red flag. This is what the communists in Germany in 1930s came up with. Isn't that amazing? It's just the old communist iconography, actually made by two guys who were members of it was called the Association of Revolutionary Visual Artists. They were like, they were just communist propaganda artists, right? So they're the ones who came up with the flag, and now it's the same flags that they use today. All right, another debunking here. People will be like, oh, Antifa, they're not organized. Therefore, it's not real. And because it's not real, they're not dangerous. It's just a boogeyman you guys are making up. They're not organized, therefore not real, therefore not dangerous. That's so absurd. First of all, obviously real, just eyeballs. But you can have a large group of people organized in a decentralized way, right? You could be decentralized, but still organized, especially with the internet now. Back in the day, you couldn't do that, right? You needed to get together, there needed to be a hierarchy, all that. But with the internet, you can be connected online all around the world with no real figurehead, but just enough to radicalize and push people into violence and destruction. Like the murder of Charlie Kirk. Did there need to be a ringleader to get him to do that? Like, oh, like the guy who assassinated Charlie Kirk, he needed a boss who needed a higher boss to tell. Like, no, you don't need that stuff. Like, I mean, Satan's the head of Antifa. He's the father of lies. That's all the organizational structure these people need. The goal of these Antifa people is just to destroy. It's what they do. And if your goal is to destroy, you're not really one for organization anyway. So you can't judge them by who they say they are. Just look at their fruit. Just look at the fruit. Of course it's real. And of course we know what they're standing for is bad. I saw this picture the other day of George Floyd Square. Chris Rufo took this. He went and visited it in person. George Floyd Square. This is where George Floyd died of his drug overdose. So there's the food store, right, that's called Cup Foods. They've renamed their name to Unity Foods. And it's all George Floyd everything. It's a big giant shrine to George Floyd because the guys who work there are like, don't blame us. We just called the police because he used counterfeit money. Like, sorry. And there's this big sign paid for by the state. It's like an official sign, like a road sign. It says Historic George Floyd Memorial. And then underneath it, it says Emez Wright Memorial. I said, Emez Wright? Who's Emez Wright? Emez Wright was shot and murdered in George Floyd Square in a drive-by shooting. He was just standing on the sidewalk and some guy rolls up to him and just murders him right there on the streets and drives away. Okay. So there's your George Floyd Square. But this picture right here of this abandoned gas station, spray painted across the front, where there's people, there's power. Maybe except the power to run a functioning gas station? Like you don't have that. You don't have the power to run a functioning society for sure. You can't even run the gas station. You drove them out of business and you've done nothing. The gas station used to be a speedway. They covered up speed, you see there, and they wrote People's Way. How's it going? Communists. And then on the right-hand side, you see Malcolm X says, the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. No one involved in Antifa or any of this stuff has ever prepared for anything in their life ever. Like nothing productive. Maybe they're planning the next, attacking an ICE facility. But that's it. That's all they can do. They can't plan their life. Now, you'd think George Floyd Square would be the most prosperous part of town. You'd think the people involved, if they were good people who built and create things, you'd think George Floyd Square would be hustling, bustling, beautiful. They'd have a school there with the best kids who had the best grades, and they'd have beautiful housing and stores. It'd be like this great, thriving, wonderful part of town. Of course not. Of course not. Look how bleak it is. And that's America's future. If we don't stop these people, because that's what they want. It's all they can do. Last point. Then people get stuck up on this, especially designating them as a terrorist organization. Like, oh, they're Americans. Yeah, like we can have enemies domestic. I don't think we pay enough attention to this idea of enemies foreign and domestic. When you make an oath, when you become a senator, or even to join the military, the line is, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against who? It doesn't just say support and defend it. It says against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It's true for the military as well. We have domestic enemies. I mean, goodness, the Democrats spent the last 4+ years calling us terrorists, all providing cover for them. I'm more concerned about enemies domestic than I am enemies foreign, because the enemies domestic can hide behind their constitutional rights, all while seeking to destroy the country we love. We need to out them. We need to follow the violence, follow the money. We'll do those things next. First, follow the money with Seamus Bruner right here on the First TV.
This is a money story. And at the Government Accountability Institute, my colleague and I, Peter Schweitzer and our team, we followed the money, and we followed it to the top of what we call the protest industrial complex, Riot Inc. And we found a network of NGOs. It's not just the Soros network, the Open Society network, it's other funding networks, the Arabella funding network, the Tides funding network, Neville Roy Singham and his network, Foreign Cash. And it's also big left-wing funders. Some of them are not citizens of this country. Mr. Hans-Jörg Wyss of Switzerland. They're pouring money into this entire ecosystem.
All right, this is amazing. We're talking to that guy right there, Seamus Bruner from the Government Accountability Institute, the best at following the money. Seamus, super grateful you're here. Tell us about that time at the White House, just how it happened, what it was like being in the White House, et cetera.
Oh, it was amazing, Mike. It's great to be with you. I got a call saying, can you come up and brief the White House? I thought it would be White House staff, found out the day of it would be President Trump and his top cops. So I got a little nervous, like, man, this better be a good one. I also realized pretty quickly that the other people there would be, the brave journalists on the ground who are putting their life at risk to document all the crimes of Antifa. So I realized, especially so, that the money is going to be an important part of this, because we know about the violence. Everyone wants to know, where's the money coming from?
Yeah, real quick. I've always called it Antifa. You call it Antifa. I hear more of that too.
Yeah, Antifa, it changes day to day, but I think you're right. Antifa, okay. Anti-fascists.
Okay, either way, that doesn't matter. The money's more important. So help us out here. Where does it start? Where does it trickle down? Or do you like to start at the bottom and go up?
Well, we start at the top. I mean, we actually aren't, my opinion on Antifa is there's a lot of violent groups, not just Antifa, and they can drop the name Antifa any day and say, instead, today, we're pro-democracy, we're pro-Dems. So the message I wanted to convey to the White House is that there's an entire ecosystem that enables this protest industrial complex, what we call Riot Inc. It's not just the violent boots on the ground. It's the bail funds that get them out of jail as quickly as possible and back onto the streets to cause chaos. It's the lawyers groups. There's all kinds of lawyers groups that help defend violent criminals. I mean, of course, they deserve to be defended, but trying to get them out, and we have so many repeat offenders here. So that's part of it. You've got the PR arm, the propaganda arm of the protest industrial complex, saying that Antifa doesn't exist. Everybody that we don't like is a fascist. And what do we do with fascists? Well, you know the rest. So that's the message I wanted to convey. So we started at the top. We followed the money. We followed it all the way to the top. Yes, of course, it's George Soros and the Open Society network. It's also the Arabella funding network. It's also, the Tides network. And it's a pretty direct pass-through from taxpayer funding into things like Tides. Tides will then turn around and fund all kinds of groups. Antifa does not have a LLC or a 501c3 that it can receive funding from, but that's why it's bigger than Antifa. You've got groups like there was one down in Atlanta. Most of its money came from the Tides network. It was called the Network for Strong Communities. Its top executives, top founders and board members, they were involved in this riotous event called Stop Cop City, where they were attacking the Atlanta Police Department. They were charged, more than 60 people were charged with violent crimes ranging from, just arson and assaulting law enforcement all the way up to domestic terrorism. Now, that became a RICO investigation because of all of the money flows. Charges of money laundering were made. It's still an ongoing case. Some of the charges are being dropped because of various prosecutorial issues. But nonetheless, it was extremely violent. People were burning things, beating up police officers. There were weapons, guns, and stuff involved. I think one person got shot. And then you just look at the anti-ICE riots and the anti-ICE, it's still ongoing in Portland. I believe this weekend is going to be pretty hot. Chicago, Seattle. And there's all kinds of groups, not just Antifa, that facilitate, enable, and perpetrate some of these crimes.
Tell me more about the Tides Foundation. What is their stated mission, and who donates to the Tides Foundation?
Yeah, the Tides Foundation is just like the Arabella Network. It's and just like really a lot of the Soros entities, which is it exists as a pass-through. I mean, their stated objective is probably something like to do the most good for everyone or something. But what it really is it's just a dark money pass-through where George Soros gives a lot of money through Tides. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, a lot of the control oligarchs we've talked to in the past, they make huge donations to Tides. Tides will then distribute it. Mark Benioff of Salesforce, the Salesforce Foundation, they gave over $20 million into Tides, which then, and then they say, well, we don't know what Tides does with it after we give it to them. But it's like, well, we've got a pretty consistent pattern here of these groups down at the lower levels on the ground committing all kinds of chaos and mayhem.
Even like best case scenario, let's say that Salesforce guy, like why does he think he's giving to Tides? And like the answer could be, oh, he knows he's funding Antifa to kill cops. Or it's like, oh no, I think they're involved in, like what's like the best case scenario?
Oh, that's a brilliant question, Mike, because we haven't even gotten into the other things. I mean, we're just focused on Riot Inc. right now, but that's just one initiative of this, dark money left-wing network. They've got the migrant resettlement initiatives. They've got the climate alarmism initiatives. They've got, crucially, the get out the vote ballot chasing initiatives. So Riot Inc. is kind of like just the military paramilitary arm, yes. But maybe Mark Benioff thinks that he's funding the helping migrants get resettled in the country part of it, or the climate justice part of it.
Okay, who's in charge? Who runs the Tides Foundation? Who's the one who's distributing the money to all the different smaller groups?
They're Democrat activists. I could get you their names. They're in some of our reports. I don't remember them offhand, but they're just kind of shadow operators. They're not household names.
Okay, so rich people donate to the Tides Foundation. It sounds good. It's a nice name. I'm supporting election integrity. This group of activists have millions of dollars at their disposal. They hand it out to hundreds, thousands of smaller groups. Like how many are there? That's one question. And then what do those
our
groups
database
do with the money? Is there another pass through?
Yeah, our database that we put together, and it's painstaking work going through hundreds and hundreds of 990. So basically every year, Tides, and it's got 5 or so sub-entities, Tides Nexus, Tides Center, Tides Foundation. Each one of them has to file a document at the end of the year declaring who they gave money to. The Soros network has a dozen or more. The Arabella network has more than 7. And so each one of those, I mean, we're talking about in our database over 50 individual NGOs. You go back 5 years, you're talking about 250 990s. And then we go through them and they each have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of grants. So our database has over 200,000 grants. Now, a lot of those are repeats to the same entities, like the ACLU, for example, will get like between these different groups, $50 million spread across 100 or 200 grants. But we're talking thousands and thousands of 200,000 individual grants, probably to, I'd say 500 or more, maybe over 1,000 different entities. I mean, it's a dizzying number. Just the No Kings protests and the protest organizers, that was over 200. And we're not even talking about the ballot chasing and the immigration.
So let's say there's one more pass through, right? So they give the money to this one group, this one LLC or whatever. They then pass it on to like the people on the ground. Who are those people on the ground, the lowest level, the foot soldiers? And what are they doing with this money that comes from the Tides Foundation in the beginning? What does it look like at the end?
Yeah, so I mean, so using the Stop Cop City, which I believe is the most like clear example. There's been court records that we've been able to go through and really understand how these foot soldiers work. You've got the Network for Strong Communities. They are organizing the protests. They are organizing the events. There's, they call themselves forest defenders. They sort of made this like an it was like one part anti-cop, one part climate justice. And so they call it the forest defenders. They didn't want the police to build a training facility in this one forest. And so they're paying activists. I mean, I think the largest amount of this money is going towards the professional activists who need a salary in order to work all year long. They were building encampments in the forest. They were buying weapons, according to the court documents. They were buying, supplies for getting violent, riot shields and all the rest, helmets. And I would probably say the salaries are the most, like the biggest chunk of the dough. It doesn't cost a lot of money to build a Molotov cocktail. They're not using extremely expensive, sophisticated weaponry.
So just my last question. So the salary, so there's people in America who they say they work for Protect the Forest Atlanta, and they're getting paid what, $50K a year? Just
roughly,
to be activists.
Yeah, roughly. I mean, some of them get more, and a lot of the lawyers, I mean, a lot of the money coming down from the top goes to the ACLU and the National Lawyers Guild, which are there to, protect the rioters. They'll only offer the evidence that the police got too brutal right after they got, beaten in the face or hit with a mortar or whatever. So lawyers cost a lot of money, and $50K would be about average salary of a professional organizer. I mean, sometimes more than six figures. Yep. But the Tides donation, this wasn't an extremely well-funded group. The Tides donation was only $160K.
So last question, you outline the money and you have more details, of course, than we were able to share here. You hand that over to the White House. What do you want them to do with that? What is your ultimate dream scenario?
Well, look, any criminal, any funding of criminality needs to be dealt with. It needs to be, they need to be brought to justice. I will say that I think the Tides and the Arabella networks and Soros networks, they're extremely sophisticated. Rockefeller's network has been doing this for 100 years, and they've got the best lawyers in the game. So what they do is they have all of the recipients of this money sign contracts saying, we promise we're not going to use this for criminal activity, criminal behavior. And that's what they're going to, hold up and say, look, we didn't know that any of this was going to happen. And they'll probably, they, like I said, got great lawyers, so they'll make a pretty strong case with that. But the thing is, the pattern here, over and over and over again, Riot Inc. pops up, and with the press of a button, you've got, crowds on demand, and time after time, they turn violent. They turn into assaults on law enforcement. They turn into, burning, the ICE facility, trying to burn down ICE facilities and stuff like that. Yep. So, follow the money and see if there's any way that you can get them on funding criminality through the pattern of it.
That's great. Seamus Bruner, Government Accountability Institute. Please go support them so that they and we all can properly counter the big money from the left. Seamus, great to talk to you, brother.
Thanks, Mike.
Keep it up. So Seamus mentioned that he's the guy, following the paper trail, following the money, but there's other people out there on the street risking their lives. We'll talk about one of those journalists who has been studying and following Antifa next.
Thank you, Mr. President, for having us here. And not to sound like a broken record, but it needs to be said that Antifa is real. And the reason why there's such a big problem is because we have Democrats and a lot of people in the mainstream media refusing to acknowledge that they even exist.
You understand, there's no Antifa. This is an entirely imaginary organization. There is not an Antifa. This is no different than if they announced they rounded up a dozen Decepticons.
There is no organized hierarchy to the group. And according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, compared to right-wing extremists, Antifa-linked violence is rare and limited.
Nobody even knows what it is. The first person I ever heard use the word Antifa was Donald J. Trump.
I don't even know what Antifa is. I know what the definition of Antifa is. And
I know what the word means, but it's not a group.
There is no group.
Antifa is an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you got it.
Not militia. That's what his FBI director said.
Oh, it's so great. All right, Julio Rosas, the first person that was in that first clip right there, who was also at that presidential roundtable series from the Blaze Media. He has a book called Fiery, but Mostly Peaceful. Julio, man, when you hear all these people, including the former president of the United States, talk about how Antifa is not real, how have you experienced Antifa?
I've experienced them by actually seeing what they do, right? I mean, this isn't some shadowy group that operates in secret. The whole reason why I've partly built a career off of covering street violence is because I see them organize, plan, and execute violent riots. Saw that back in 2020 in Portland and other cities, and we've seen it again for slightly different reasons. But no, it's just absolute nonsense. It's just a way to deflect blame. I mean, that's obviously typical. And there's that common post on X that's been always circulating where it's so hard to have a conversation with the left because they just deliberately refuse to understand just a basic premise of anything. So obviously, that willful, obfuscation, it just makes it hard to even be able to engage in them in debate or, just having a conversation. And that's very true. And that certainly applies to a group like Antifa and cells. So, what I told the president is that, yes, they don't have a registered LLC to do taxes, but that's because they're a criminal group. Criminal groups don't do that, but law enforcement still goes after, for example, bank robbers who are acting in concert together as a group. They're going after them because they're working in concert to commit crimes. So Antifa is very much the same way.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Like, the Bloods don't have an LLC registered with the government, the Crips. So what have you seen? What violence have you seen personally?
So the most common thing that I've seen so far this year, outside of the riots in Los Angeles, which that clip is from, but they're being very strategic in trying to target ICE facilities, ICE agents, Border Patrol, who are currently operating in different cities. So one of the ways that they do that is blockading roads that lead to an ICE facility, and we've seen a lot of that in Portland. We've seen that in Broadview. That clip right there, that's from Broadview. Which is right outside Chicago. And so, of course, they're impeding federal duties. So federal agents are going to have to come out to clear them out or arrest them if they're doing something. And that's what kind of leads to these clashes. And now, of course, you've had Democrats, regular Democrats, trying to say like, oh, they're arresting peaceful protesters, or they're attacking people who are just voicing their First Amendment rights. And that's not true. I mean, when you're in the road and in one of the videos you played, they're attacking a vehicle that's attempting to come through. I mean, that's not covered by the First Amendment. So it's a continuation of what we've seen back in 2020, to where violence from the left is not only okay, but they act like it doesn't happen. And so therefore they say, well, actually the political violence is a problem on the right, actually. And it's like, well, no, it's not. The Proud Boys haven't been a thing since January 6th. Patriot Front just shows up randomly, unannounced. They march around and then they leave after, a couple of minutes. And as far as I know, they don't do anything beyond that. So, I mean, this is organized. I mean, this is deliberate and it's planned.
In your experience being there, I don't know what type of interactions you've had being able to talk to these people in like a relatively maybe calmer environment. But what is your understanding of the motivations on the ground? We were just talking to Seamus a moment ago about like the big money Soros Tides Foundation, but like the guy on the ground who's yelling at ICE officers or whatever, what drives them?
Well, so it's a lifestyle. So when you're talking about Antifa specifically, it's certainly a lifestyle, and it's that counterculture, revolutionary type, which is why it's very popular in the Pacific Northwest, because obviously that's where that general consensus is very, very, very prevalent. But it's also, so it's a weird combination where you have kind of, the down on their luck types because of drug use or homelessness or, whatever mental problems. And that's not being insulting. Like no normal person does this. They're able to hold a 9-to-5 job. But then you also have people that are part of this movement who are well off, right? I mean, we've had Democratic politicians, their children are involved in this. Catherine Clark, who's the Democrat whip, her son was arrested in one case up in Massachusetts, I believe, or in the Northeast. So obviously, those types of people aren't afraid of where their next meal is coming from or where they're going to be sleeping, or they don't have to hold down a regular job. So that enables them to be these kind of cosplaying revolutionaries. So it's kind of a mix.
Yeah.
You're not going to really see, again, just specifically with Antifa, you're not going to see a middle class, dad of two involved in this, because a middle class dad of two has more responsibilities. I'm sure there might be a case or here or there, but that's why it resonates. And again, they truly believe it, right? These aren't people. These aren't fair weather protesters, I would say, right? They truly believe that this is a fascist dictatorship. They're even more enraged because they thought they got rid of Trump after 2020. He's back and he's better than ever in terms of carrying out his policies and actually, following through with it. So they think that this is it, right? Like, to them, is like, we either act now or it's going to be too late and we're not going to have, the ability to do what we want anymore. So they are true believers. They are true believers, I would say.
Okay. That last point is actually really, really important. If they were just in it because this is like a cosplay of punk culture and I get kind of a high going out in the middle of the night and having tear gas thrown my way and I feel like I'm doing something important, but I'll just go home and do it again tomorrow or whatever. That's one thing, which is bad, but like you're saying these guys are like true believers to the end, which to me, I leaves open that they would go to the death or take more drastic efforts than just being an instigator causing trouble. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's why we've seen the attacks on ICE facilities, like shooting attacks. We had the one in Dallas and then the other one in Alvarado. So, that was an attempt of a complex ambush. I mean, they deliberately set off fireworks because, obviously you don't want to get shot with a firework, but you're not going to do anything, but it's going to draw attention, right? It's going to draw people to respond to that. And they were planning on then shooting the first responders. Thankfully that failed, but then we saw the next attack in Dallas where this guy, who thankfully just on his own, but he only ended up shooting detainees, right? So so it's almost comical if it wasn't so tragic, but that's who we're dealing with, right? And so and there's other cases even before 2020 or this year where you've had a guy in Washington State trying to set off the propane tanks at the ICE facility over there, and he was shot and killed, and he's considered a martyr within the movement. There was a Trump supporter that was shot in Portland in 2020 during that chaotic time, and that guy fled. That guy fled, and he went to the death. Basically, he got into a shootout with authorities who were going after him. So, these aren't. It's easy to make fun of them. Don't get me wrong, because they are kind of goofy characters. But when they're backed up into a corner like that, for one reason or another, they're dangerous. They are very dangerous. And just recently, a lot of my colleagues who were part of that roundtable, in Portland, they put out basically a hit list with their pictures and their names and their quote unquote crimes on poles around the city, so that people can be on the lookout for them to do who knows what.
Yeah, really, really, really important point. Okay, we got about 30 seconds. What do you want the president to do? Perfect dream scenario. What are the next steps?
Well, so the next steps, and this is what we recommended to him in the roundtable, is to designate Antifa not just as a domestic terrorist organization, but a foreign terrorist organization, because Antifa is not just a thing in the United States. They're very active in Europe and the UK, especially like Germany, France, things like that. So they all support each other. Again, it doesn't require a strict hierarchy to do what they call mutual aid. And so they do it all the time. And so, that's another big blow to them if they can go after their finances, not just domestically, but also the support they get from international groups.
And why do you want to do that? What's the point of that declaration?
Well, because it severely hampers their ability to be out there, because we see it all the time. They always, in like their long protracted sieges, you need supplies. That's just a basic thing, right? It's not necessarily getting like, here's $100, go do something. It's here, we're going to spend money on food, water, first aid kit, gas masks, painters masks, helmets, body armor, stuff like that, signs. just the basic provisions for what they need to do for their activities. So you take that away, it's going to hamper their ability to be out there for weeks and weeks on end.
Where can people follow you on Twitter and follow your latest of following these guys?
So they can follow me on X at Julio_Rosas11. I'm over at Blaze Media, and then they can also subscribe to my Substack, mostlypeaceful.media.
Julio, keep it up. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Julio told me before went on, he said, Seamus follows the money, I follow the violence. We need both of you. Appreciate you guys. We'll come back with our Politics by Faith conclusion next, right here on the First TV. Welcome back to our special, the conclusion of our special on Antifa. Hopefully following the money and following the violence was informative. I'm excited that this Trump administration is taking this seriously. The point I'd like to make here is evil fills a void. You have a void, evil will fill it. So let's do everything we can to not make voids. Evil, paganism, comes in many different forms. I like to think of it as a box. Think of a box full of Christianity. If people are living their Christian faith boldly, then nothing can get in. There's no room. It's full. There's no hosts in which the devil can get a foothold. There's no hosts where parasitic ideologies can even get inside. But when people turn from God, that's where Satan gets in there. And we've seen this in a lot of movements in our lifetime. We saw it with the COVID cult, Black Lives Matter, wokeism. It's all religion. They're all different religions trying to be. The rise of Islam, ghetto culture, it all fills a void. Islam can only get a foothold in America when the Christian church is weak. Zoran can only win the mayor of New York City's race when New York City is full of foreigners. The communist Muslim from Uganda can only win when there's a lot of communist Muslims from around the world. When people, individuals, have a God-shaped hole in their life, we try to fill it. We try, can't, but we try. And when societies have a God-shaped hole, that gets filled too. A lot's been said about the comparison between wokeism and Christianity. And wokeism, Antifa, it's all the same thing. The left, the pagans, they make their own blasphemous and twisted versions of Christianity. Both Christianity and wokeism have the concept of original sin. Right? Christians, we have original sin because of the rebellion to God through Adam. Wokeism, your original sin is you're born white. Salvation for Christians comes through faith in Jesus. For the woke, it comes from constant works of activism and ideological purity. Now, of course, there's major differences. Right? Truth in Christianity comes from God's word. Truth in wokeism comes from whatever fad exists at the moment. But the biggest difference is that Christianity offers a way of redemption. Christianity offers actual salvation. Wokeism does not. Once you've sinned in the woke cult, just by being white, there never is true salvation. You can never do enough. You can never actually be saved. I think one aspect of Antifa and of wokeism that's been overlooked, I know this is hard to talk about, so we'll just give it a go here. How many people, let's focus on Antifa first. How many people in Antifa are just losers? Again, I don't mean that meanly. They're just losers and outcasts, maybe is a better word. Right? Where in the past, if you didn't quite conform to society's expectations, you lived in a small community. So even if you're the outcast, you're kind of the weirdo outcast, all right, this is the way it goes. You just live here. That's it. But today, everyone's connected. And the losers and the rejects and the outcasts can unite. And they can cling to something that gives them meaning and purpose. And they can fight the man. Full of hate. They can hate themselves, but they can hate everything Hate inside, hate outside, hate, and have a lot of resentment about society and about this country, right? And it makes sense. And I'm not trying to be mean. Like, if you can't hold a job, you're going to hate capitalism, right? If you get fired, if you're like bad at working, if you have no work ethic, you're going to hate capitalism, and you're going to be like, oh, the rich man is exploiting me. You know, it's like, oh, well, actually, you're not good at your job. You don't have a good work ethic. If you had trouble making friends your whole life, you don't have any friends, like, yeah, you can hate the systems of oppression and the systems of bigotry that are against you. That's why you don't have any friends. It's not that you're like not a good, caring, loving person to others or something. It's just like, oh, the systems are against you. Right? If you don't have a lover, well, you can hate gender norms. That's the problem, gender norms. If you don't have a good education, then it's easy to hate the truth and the idea of truth and the rigorous pursuit of truth. Right? And that's not mean. It's true. If people want to revel in sin, you're going to hate the truth. But it's not even, I shouldn't even say that last part about sin. It's more just, I think a lot of the root of this is people who just feel like outcasts. So it's better, or something at least, to fight against the system that has outcasted them. It's true with a lot of people who hate the church. Maybe they were in the church growing up, or they went to church once or something, and they were wronged by the church in some way. So therefore they hate it. Makes sense. So I say this because a lot of this is on us. A lot of this is us for not embracing in love and in truth people who may be different. And that builds up. That resentment builds up over time. And Satan will then take over. Satan will get in that person's mind. Satan will enter where the pain is, where the wounds are, where the cuts are, and get in there and work in someone's heart, work in their mind, and cause chaos. And that can result in a lot of different manifestations. And one of them, for enough people, is to fight back, to fight politically in Antifa. But this sowing and building of resentment and hatred, it's so wicked. In communist China, they during the revolution, they had these struggle session-like events. The literal translation was speak bitterness. And the point was to get everyone together in the town and air their grievances. It's like Festivus in Seinfeld. Just air your grievances and talk about why you hate everyone so much. And in the beginning, people needed to be goaded. They needed to be forced to do this. And the goal was for the communists was to get the lower class to hate the middle class, and the middle class to hate the rich, and the rich to hate everyone to hate everyone all the time. And all these communities were destroyed. The communists came in and they destroyed these communities that were unified for hundreds of years, thousands of years. These communities were fine together. And the communists came in and they needed everyone to hate everyone. They needed to be torn apart. And the communists did it by design. And we saw hints of this, more than hints. But we saw enough of it with DEI and Black Lives Matter and all that stuff. The unconscious bias training that your HR department gave you, right? That's all bitterness. TikTok, all the stuff on the internet, all this just promoting bitterness. It's stirring up envy and greed and hatred, all these sins. And the answer is the same. The true answer to all the answer to feeling like an outcast is following Jesus. The answer to feeling full of resentment is to be content in Jesus. The answer to being filled with hate is to find peace in Jesus. And I know all these things sound so goofy, right? But let me say the last one. All those things I just mentioned are things that lead people to thinking Antifa is the answer, when the Bible is actually the answer. Jesus is the antidote. And I know all that sounds like hooey and weird, because I remember it's like 10 years ago when people would tell me stuff like that, before I was a Christian, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what do you mean, like, in Jesus? Like, do you know Jesus? I don't know what you're talking about. All I can say is go to read the Bible. Just read it. Read it. Go to church. Find a Bible-believing church near you and go to it. And just go to it for a year. Every Sunday for a year, just go. And it will make sense. I'll end with Romans 1:24. Therefore, God gave them up to the lusts of their heart, to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. Because, why? They exchanged the truth about God for a lie. And they worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who's blessed forever. There's a lot of people who think, I'm not going to go to church. I'm just going to keep myself open and free from man-made religion. You're not. It's possible. Because if you're not filling it with what is good and true, everything else is getting in there. The only way to keep out the evil of this world is to fill it with the truth. Politics by Faith, my podcast. We do this pretty much every day. Take the news of the day, run it through the Bible. Check out my podcast, Politics by Faith, wherever you listen to podcasts. Like Slater. The First TV. Spread the word.